and welcome to our Wednesday night class. Tonight we are studying Parashat Devarim, the beginning of the 5th book of Moses, and we're studying the holy words of Rabbi Leib, Heyman, and welcome everyone for joining us. This evening, Rabbi Leib focuses on the order and method in which Moses rebukes the Jewish people at the end of his life. Just 36 days before the end of his life, he reviews everything that transpired between him and the Jewish people while leading them in the wilderness. And he opens and he starts with rebuking them. Take a look at your screen. This is the beginning of this week's Torah portion, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 1. It says, Ele ha-devarim, and these are the words Asher diber Moshe el kol Israel, that Moses spoke to all of Israel, be'ever hayarden, on the side of the Jordan, right? Because he did not cross over, right? Now he goes, Bamidbar, Ba'arava, Mosuf, Ben Paranu, Ben Tovel, Velavan, Chatzirot, B'Zahav, and this is a slew of places which the Jewish people committed different sins. Rashi details each and every one, what the Jewish people did in each of those places. So Moses is rebuking the Jewish people right at the end of his life, and what he does is at the beginning he gives all the main ones. He gives 7 different mistakes the Jewish people did, all based on the places they went to. He hinted to each and every one of them, and then he goes and he focuses on 2 specific sins at first. Later throughout the book, he goes and he details all of them, but the 2 that he first chooses to rebuke the Jewish people on in great detail is, number 1, their account of wanting to appoint judges, meaning that they wouldn't only interact and deal with Moses, that there would be shoftim and dayanim, judges. Second was the sin of the spies. These 2 are the first 2 sins that Moses rebukes the Jewish people in great detail. On this, Reb Leib has 2 questions. First question is, what's the connection between these 2 sins? And why is it that Moses groups these 2 up? So what's their connection? Why are they the first to be rebuked? And furthermore, how can we even compare these 2 sins? The sin of the spies and the reaction of the Jewish people is definitely a lot worse than the Jewish people requesting Moses to appoint judges. So that's first question. Second question is, why did Moses skip, seemingly, the most dreadful or the saddest sin the Jewish people committed, which was the sin of the golden calf? He mentions that the Jewish people are leaving the Har Sinai, Mount Sinai. This is in chapter 1 of this week's Torah portion, and he just says that they leave. He doesn't say anything about the sin of the golden calf. So again, in short, the 2 questions. Question number 1 is, why these 2 sins? What's the connection between them? Why the sin of appointing judges or requesting to appoint judges and the sin of the spies? Why are these the first to be rebuked? How can we compare the 2? Second question is, why did Moses skip over rebuking the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf at this time? Reb Leib says, in order to understand this, we have to take note that there seems to be somewhat of a contradiction when, in the understanding of the Mefarshim, of the commentaries, of what the appointment of these judges really was, or what the intention was. From this week's Torah portion, from chapter 1, verse 6, Rashi explains, he seems to explain that it was a great honor and a merit, and the Jewish people should be blessed for the fact that they requested to appoint judges. However, later same chapter 1, verse 14, Rashi goes and writes that Moses is rebuking the Jewish people for their intentions behind why they wanted to appoint judges, and how what they really were doing is they were intending to find ways that they'll be able to bribe judges to give them the answers they wanted, because they knew they had no hope with bribing Moses. So this was a display, Reb Leib says, of an utter lack of gratitude and respect for their leader, for Moses, for Moshe Rabbeinu. So once we now understand that, yes, in essence, it's great to have judges that will be able to help Moses carry the burden of teaching and leading the Jewish people. But on the other hand, the intention the Jewish people had by requesting that was not a pure and good intention. So now, Reb Leib answers, why did Moses group up these two sins in rebuke and use them as the first? The sin of appointing the judges and the sin of the spies, because he was telling them that the sin of the spies all started with their disrespect for him and their sinful intentions in appointing judges. What led the Jewish people to sin based on the report of the spies, Reb Leib says, all started from their disrespect and lack of gratitude that they had for Moses. At first it was, let's appoint judges. Then it led them to question Moses and say, we don't believe you in what you're telling us the promised land has to offer. And then when they came back with their report, boom, they all cried in vain for a report that was distorted and which sealed them, their fate, to not enter the land of Israel. So Reb Leib says this is why these two are grouped up and they're the first. But then he goes on and says, what happens in the meantime to the Jewish people? Based on these big mistakes, they lost something very special. They lost 3 of the 10 lands that were given to Abraham in order to give to his descendants. It was really 10 nations and lands that Abraham was given. But then, as we know, the Jewish people were only given 7. That's why they were to conquer the 7 lands in the 7 nations in the land of Canaan. But they lost Edom, Ammon, and Moab. These 3 nations and their land was really supposed to be given to the Jewish people. They lost it. And that's why the Torah tells us in this week's Torah portion that they just traveled around Har Seir because they weren't able to conquer it, because God took it away from them for their great mistake of disrespecting Moses and not being grateful to Moses. Now, we can answer the second question. Reb Leib says, now we can understand why Moses skipped over the sin of rebuking the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf. Moses was absent for that sin. And they could possibly claim the only reason why they were convinced by the mixed multitude was because they didn't have Moses to lean on. They didn't have Moses to lead them. So Moses was not rebuking them for that. Moses himself was able to say, okay, I'll give you that one. Even God forgave you for that one. Because Moses was absent. And the Yetzer Hara showed the Jewish people that Moses was dead. He showed an image of Moses dead in Shamayim, in heaven. So Moses was fine. He's like, I'll give you that one. I was absent for that. But these sins I was there for, when you requested to appoint judges, when you requested the spies, when you complained and you cried in vain for the spies, I was there. You should have respected and believed in me. And this explanation, Reb Leib says, fits perfectly with the way Reb Leib interprets the reason why Esav and Lot merited those 3 lands. Esav and Lot were both descendants of Abraham, Esav being his grandson, Lot being his nephew. And why is it that Lot received this great gift of 2 lands of the 3, Ammon and Moab? Was because he respected Abraham. When they went to Egypt, Abraham and Sarah, he didn't throw them under the bus and say, no, they're not really brother and sister. By respecting Abraham, he received these 2 lands. Esav respected Yitzhak, his father, to the utmost degree. And because of that, he also honored a land. Reb Leib says we see here that respect and honor merits inheritance. And the opposite provides the loss of inheritance. Now, we'll take a little pause here before the next part of Reb Leib's discussion this evening. But we do see this in our own lives, that parents tend, we should not know from this. Of course, we all want our parents that are still alive to live till 120 in good health. But it's known, and it's also the feeling we have towards our children, that the children that respect their parents, you're not supposed to do it for the sake of the inheritance you're going to receive from your parents. Of course not. That's disgusting. But as normal human and parental tendency is the children that respect you. You want to do more for them. You want to give more to them. You want to leave more for them. And we already see this by the way that God is putting together who deserves what based on how they respected their parent, their elder, their leader. The Jewish people disrespected Moses. They lost 3 out of 10. That's 30% of their inheritance. The land of Israel would be 30% larger today if it wasn't for that. Can you imagine? That's massive. And Lot and Esav merited lands that were really not supposed to be for them, not intended for them, because of the respect they had for their uncle, their father. I think it's a very, very important lesson. Now Reb Leib says, if we look at the way Moses rebuked the Jewish people, we can learn for ourselves the proper way to deliver a correction, a criticism, or a rebuke. And he gives it from 2 different examples. First is, look at the way Moses starts. This is in chapter 1. Let me pull it up here. Chapter 1, verse 9. Moses starts off by saying, Moses is saying that back then, when you requested for the judges to help me out, you're right, I couldn't carry you alone. Now, Reb Leib says, Moses at that point is intending to rebuke the Jewish people for asking for judges. He starts off in a positive light, and then he continues. Take a look. Verses 10 and 11. The Lord your God has multiplied you, and behold, you are today as the stars of the heavens in abundance. Next verse. May the Lord of your forefathers add to you 1,000-fold as many as you are. And he should bless you as he spoke to you. What's going on over here? Reb Leib says, based on Rashi says that at this point the Jewish people were definitely not as numerous as the stars. There were 600,000 men. Let's put it all together with men, women, children. They're around 3 million. That's not as numerous as the stars. There's an infinite amount of stars. So rather, what he was telling them is that you will always survive. Rashi says, Moses is telling them that you will always survive just as the sun, the moon, and the stars are always there. So the commentaries, Reb Leib ask, but the verse clearly means to say, larov, that they were numerous. Surely meaning that they were numerous many times more than just the 600,000 or the 3 million. So Reb Leib says, you know what Moshe was saying? Moshe was telling them that indeed you are numerous, but you will be way more numerous. You will be 1,000 times more numerous very soon. However, you are not as numerous or likened to grains of sand, which each one on their own is completely useless. Rather, you are likened to stars, each in their own right great, even when they're alone. Right? A star is a star. Of course, a blanket of stars is beautiful, but one single star is so meaningful as well. Why did Moses mention this now and here? Right now, when he's about to rebuke them for requesting the judges. Right now, he's going to tell them that, oh, you're so numerous, and you're going to be numerous, and you're all so special like one star. Reb Leib is saying Moses was doing this to soften his rebuke. he was saying, I know your desire for the judges came from a place of greatness, since you are all so great. I understand how great each and every one of you. You are each like a star, and you are so strict on yourselves to fulfill and to know everything. And that's the only reason why you were always questioning me. Then Moses comes. Take a look at your screen, verse 12. How can I bear your trouble, your burden, your strife all by myself? Moses is telling the Jewish people, really, I couldn't. Ki'ilu, like, oh, as if I couldn't bear the burden of this great nation, of all of you stars all alone. I did need help. And through this praise, Moses then goes and rebukes the Jewish people. Reb Leib says that through an open and obvious display of love that Moses had for the Jewish people, he was hinting to and hiding a rebuke, but the whole time he was putting his finger on the source of their mistake, and that was their lack of gratitude and respect for him, for Moshe Rabbeinu. It's an important lesson that Moses came and he softened his rebuke by making the nation feel like what they were doing was noble and right, even though he knew it wasn't, just in order that they lend him their hearts so that he could give a potent, powerful, and meaningful and helpful, most important, helpful rebuke to the people. Now Leib asks a huge question. He says, all the rebukes Moses is giving to the Jewish people, they didn't sin themselves. These were all sins that their parents, the previous generation, committed. So why is he giving them all of these rebukes? All the people who committed those sins are no longer there. What benefit does Moses have in rebuking the children of those who sinned? So Leib says, not only didn't this second generation of the wandering in the wilderness rectify the sins of their parents, as Chazal, as our sages tell us, they continued in their ways, and they made the exact same mistakes, which Reb Leib says is even worse, because this second generation was born in the desert. They were born and they grew up and they lived off the palms of God. Literally. They never suffered the bondage and the slavery that their parents did in Egypt. None of that oppression. They should have been even more committed and have more belief and gratitude towards Hashem and to Moses. But they didn't. And Arab Leib goes and he takes the 4 great sins that the Jewish people had and he compares it. He shows you how the first generations committed it. The second generation committed it in the same way. Look at this. First generation, back in Exodus chapter 17, complain that they did not have water. They just left the land of Egypt and they're complaining for water. Second generation, in Bamidbar chapter 20, at Memeriva, the Jewish people again complain, we have no water. This was right after Miriam passed away. All of a sudden, they go and they start complaining. Both times using the terminology, the Torah uses the terminology of Vayirev Ha'am, that the nation was complaining. Number 1, so water. Second is the sin of the golden calf. In Exodus chapter 32, we read about the sin of the golden calf. And in Numbers, Bamidbar chapter 25, we read of the sin of Baal Peor, of when the Jewish people worshipped Baal Peor. It was a one of the attempts of Bilam and Balak. So the worshipping of the golden calf was idolatry. They committed again idolatry. The second generation did by Baal Peor. Number 3, the first generation complained about their dissatisfaction with the manna, with the wonder bread. This is in Bamidbar chapter 11. Second generation did also. In chapter 21 in Bamidbar, again the Jewish people, after Aharon passes away, not after Aharon passes away, before Aharon passes away, they start complaining, it's so boring to have this bread. We need a little bit of variety in our diets. No. They started complaining again. Number 4, the sin of the spies. They all said, when the spies came back, the Jewish people said, let's head back to Egypt. This is in chapter 14 in the book of Bamidbar. Now, second generation, after Aaron passes away, the Jewish people actually went back 8 destinations towards Egypt out of fear, which Reb Leib says is even worse than what the first generation did, because the first generation just said we'll go back. They never actually went back. The second generation went back 8 stops, 8 destinations closer to Egypt. So what Reb Leib is saying is that after all, the second generation not only did not rectify or correct the sins of their parents, they followed suit, they followed in their ways, and they did even worse in certain situations. But now if we look at Moses, we see that he prefers to detail in great length the sin of the previous generation, and he even avoids rebuking the current generation directly, rather only hinting to them, because again, a direct criticism and rebuke is very hurtful. So Moses did this because he knew that they would accept his rebuke better and they would have a greater chance of doing teshuvah if he would do it this way. 2 last points. Number 1 is, later in the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Devarim, in Parashat Ekev, Moshe rebukes the Jewish people with other sins that they committed. And amongst them, he mentions the following. Take a look at your screen. This is in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 6. ואשר עשה לדתן ולאבירם בני אליאב בן ראובן אשר חצתה הארץ את פיה ותבלעם ואת בתיהם את אהליהם. So here Moses is mentioning that which Datan, Aviram, the tribe of Reuven, did during their rebellion against Moses, and then how the earth opened up and swallowed them and their households and all of their possessions. The Ramban, so obviously what Moses is alluding to over here was the sin of the Korach rebellion. The Ramban, Nachmanides, asks a powerful question. He says, why did Moses not mention Korach's name? He mentioned Datan, he mentioned Aviram, he mentioned the tribe of Reuven. They all sinned, but who was the leader of that sin? Korach. He doesn't mention Korach. Reb Leib says, based on what we just said, there's a very perfect and deep reason why Moses did not mention Korach. He left him out. You see, Korach's rebellion, says Reb Leib, that sin was a one-of sin. Moshe was suspected by Korach and his entourage for making things up. They blamed him of nepotism. But that sin never happened again. When Korach was swallowed up in the ground, there was no similar sin that followed that challenged Moses to that degree. So for that reason, Moses left it out. He didn't mention Korach because Korach and what Korach stood for was no longer applicable to the second generation. They did do teshuvah on that sin as a nation. So why did he mention Datan and Aviram? Why did he mention the sin at all? Because their sin was still prevalent. They were troublemakers from beginning to end. From the first time Moses came to the Jewish people in Egypt and mentioned that God came to him, they were troublemakers. Throughout the first 2 years of their traveling in the wilderness, until they finally were swallowed up by the land, by the earth, they were constantly bothering and torturing and tormenting Moses. Moses mentioned them to teach that even the current generation should not act like they did, who were constantly challenging and defying orders. That is something that he is imparting them now that Joshua is going to take over. Don't drive Joshua crazy and up the wall the way that Datan and Aviram did. But Korach he didn't mention, because Korach was a one-of sin that the Jewish people overcame, and they didn't fall again in that. With this, Reb Leib ends off and says that the Parashat Devarim, this week's Torah portion, is always read right before Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av this year starts Saturday night. It's all day Sunday. And Reb Leib says, take a look at an amazing difference between us and the generation that heard rebuke from Moses, that was rebuked from Moses. We just learned that the second generation in the desert which was the generation that actually entered the land of Israel, were rebuked in code for sins that they didn't even commit themselves. It was the sins of their parents. And nevertheless, they heard that rebuke and that criticism, and they grew from it, and they bettered their ways. Reb Leib says, look at in contrast to us. Every year we learn about the destruction of the temples and the list of reasons why it was destroyed. Our sages give them multiple, and I'll give them to you in a moment. And we say to ourselves, none of these apply to me. None of these apply to us. It was them who sinned. Right? The first temple, the Talmud says, was destroyed because of 3 cardinal sins: idolatry, adultery, and murder. Well, I don't do any of those. It's not me. Second temple, baseless hatred. I don't hate anyone for no good reason. I have a reason why. Another thing that the Talmud says is chilul hamoadot, that they would not keep chol hamoed. They would not observe the holidays properly. I observe the holidays properly. It's not me. Chilul Shabbat. I keep Shabbat. Well, if I would have been there, I would have kept Shabbat also, and that would not have caused the destruction of the temple. Another sin the Talmud says that brought to the destruction of the temple was that they did not do Kriyat Shema. I do Kriyat Shema every Shachrit and Arvit. I do it all the time. What? It's not. We come and we say it's not me. The Talmud says they had no embarrassment, no shame. We have shame. We have embarrassment. They didn't rebuke one another. We rebuke our fellow. What happens is that we rationalize and we say that we don't do those stuff. And if we would have been there, we wouldn't have done them either. And the temple would not have been destroyed on my account. Well, we have news for you. The Talmud says that every generation that the temple is not rebuilt, it's as if it was destroyed again. It's a very sad and heavy thing that if the temple is not rebuilt this year, it's our fault. It means in some way we are at fault of those sins and of the reason why the temple is not being rebuilt. We have to now, Reb Leib says, start looking at the world that we live in and somewhat blame ourselves for the fact the temple is not rebuilt. We have to take responsibility. We have to stop deflecting the blame. We have to strengthen ourselves and hasten, and through strengthening ourselves, hasten the coming of the Mashiach, because when we take the responsibility for those deeds and those actions, that's the only way we'll better ourselves and we will be able to bring the rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash very soon. Amen v'amen. So what we have to understand, Reb Leib is saying, is that the reason why Parashat Devarim is always read right before Tisha B'Av, it's as a hint to us. Don't be opposite to the way that the generation that received rebuke from Moses was. They received rebuke and grew from even an indirect rebuke, a rebuke that was directed towards their parents. We have, on our end, we take the opposite route. We have direct rebukes towards us. The temple is not being rebuilt and it's our fault. And what do? We deflect the blame. We say it's not us. Let's start taking responsibility. Let's start caring more for our fellow Jews, for every fellow human being, for every situation, everything, anything that we do. Put intention, care, and love and passion and compassion into everything that we do. And hopefully Hashem will see our efforts and the efforts of many more and bring back our glorious temple, glorious Beit HaMikdash, where we'll be able to witness Hashem and all of the great miracles that it came with. Be'ezrat Hashem, this year, this Tisha B'Av, let it be rebuilt. Amen v'amen. Thank you everyone for joining us. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and go for it.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
First of all, it was great. Great. But, I'm going to fess up. You said something that I didn't know what it meant. So I'm just going to ask because you know how I like learning. And if I don't know, I don't know. You were talking about the second temple. You were talking about baseless hatred. You said something about Kriyat Shema. We did our Kriyat Shema. We do it all the time. What does that mean?
Oh, So
I'm sorry that I don't know it,
no. I was rattling it off fast. The Talmud and the other commentaries give multiple reasons why the temples were destroyed. The three cardinal sins, baseless hatred,
Right.
keeping Shabbat, not keeping the holidays. Yet
Right.
one of the reasons that they said was that the Jewish people back then were not they were not reciting Kriyat Shema morning and evening.
And what is kratching? That's what I don't know what it is.
Oh, Kriyat
Is
Shema
it a
is the Shema.
blessing? Is it a prayer?
It's the Shema, the Shema.
That's the same word for Shema?
So I said it's quick. Kriyat Shema means the reading of the Shema.
Thank
Sorry,
you. Thank you. Thank you. The reading of the Shema. I'm on it. I got it. Oh my
Sorry.
goodness. That's beautiful. Okay. No. It's okay. Must be a little Canadian accent there or something. I don't know. But I got it. All right. One more quick question. And it's just a small little question. But when we were talking in the beginning about the two reasons, one was the sin of the spies. We got that one. The other one was the appointing of judges.
The request for appointing judges, yeah.
Right. But I'm kind of like going back in my mind, and I kind of think maybe I read it wrong way back then. Was it the people who requested the judges, or wasn't this Moses?
It was also Yitro's, it was Moshe's father-in-law who suggested it.
Father-in-law who said, listen, Moses, let's make it easier on you.
So,
I think if you could like take care of the big stuff, you take care of the big stuff, and let's appoint some and let's make committees, and then you can get these judges and they can take care of the smaller stuff. Isn't that kind of what happened? Moses' father-in-law took over. That's
not kind of what happened. It's exactly what happened. And honestly, when I was learning this with Yisrael Meir,
yes,
and when I was reviewing it myself and preparing the class, I was struggling with the same question and the same issue.
You and I was struggling with the same question? That's amazing.
So listen to my conclusion.
Okay.
My conclusion is not only a powerful insight, but it's a practical a development of a practical insight as well. If we go back to the book of Exodus, when Yitro comes and suggests to Moses to have a tier system of judges to help him out, we don't see there at all Moses mention, or even the Torah mention, of anything in regard to the Jewish people being the ones who are suggesting it or requesting it.
Right.
It seems like Yitro comes and suggests it to Moses. Moses speaks to God. God says, do as your father-in-law says, and go on with it. But then in the book of Deuteronomy, right now, in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, we see that Moses is rebuking the Jewish people for requesting it. So, how do we put the two together? We have to understand it as this: that in truth, the Jewish people were pushing for it and requesting it, and they had negative intentions. We said, right, because they wanted to bribe judges to rule in their favor, and they knew they couldn't bribe Moses, right?
Is that in this week's portion?
It is. It's in the commentaries.
Because I didn't get that when we were talking with Jethro.
No, so we didn't get that there.
I didn't get that.
It was not there. So what happened is that it really did happen there, but it's not written there. The Jewish people are pushing and pushing and pushing. We want to judges. It's too hard for you, Moses, right? It's too much for you. So what happens is Yitro comes along. He hears what's going on. He sees what's going on. What the Torah says, he comes and he sees and he hears what's going on. What does he see and hear going on? This is my interpretation. He sees the Jewish people requesting over and over that they want judges, that they want a tier system. Yitro gives the grand suggestion. Oh, what a genius, right? Well, no, not really. He just said, well, do what the people are saying.
So Yitro is the voice of the people.
So Yitro was a voice of the people. Moses was confused. What do I do? Hashem said, go along with it. Now, at the end of Moses' life, he rebukes them for their malintentions, even though he knew it all along. Because he asked God. At the end of the day, he asked God. God said, go along with it.
Right.
So that's the development of this story. And the lesson is sometimes the timing of the rebuke is so important that sometimes even as a parent or as a leader, as a teacher, the time to rebuke is only at the end of your life for certain things. And Moses was silent for 40 years over their malintentions of the appointment of the request of appointment of judges.
So
And
hold
at
your
the end of
tongue.
his life, he gives them the bomb. Boom.
Right. So hold your tongue. Everything is timing.
Yeah, but I was struggling with that exact issue, and then I think what I'm saying makes sense chronologically based on the commentaries.
Right. His father-in-law was representing everybody, listening. He was listening more where Moses was, doing his work.
Sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you can't see the bigger picture.
That's right. Okay, I'll buy it. I'm in. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Just me?
Oh,
Nobody
no.
else? Where's your mom?
Ron, where's Ron? Ron has a question.
What were the 3 out of 10 that were lost? The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, you said? What were they?
Stop.
No, but what were those 3 lands? Like
Moab.
Ammon, Moab, and Seir.
That was the other one.
And how did we lose those 3?
Because of the Jewish people disrespect to Moses and lack of gratitude, those 3 nations' lands were given to the descendants of Lot and Esav, and not to descendants of not the 12 tribes.
That's so interesting. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
It's a great class. Lots to process.
Baruch Hashem. Okay, this was fun. This was great as always. Thank you everyone for joining us.